All right, let's take a look at object blending, where Illustrator automatically creates a bunch of intervals between two shapes. And so the first thing I'm going to do is go up to the File menu and choose New from Template, or I can press Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N on the Mac, and then I'll go ahead and open up my Center Guides document there. And I'll start by drawing just a plain old rectangle. And of course, you can get the rectangle tool by pressing the M key. And I'll actually go ahead and press the Shift key as I drag in order to create a square. And now let's give this guy a yellow fill, let's say, and I'll change the stroke to this darker shade of orange. But it doesn't really matter. You can obviously go your own way. All right, now I'm going to switch to the ellipse tool, and I'll go ahead and draw a circle by pressing and holding the Shift key as I drag. And let's go ahead and change this guy to the shade of light blue here, and I'll change the stroke to a darker shade of blue, and also thicken up that stroke to, let's say, something like 12 points. To make it pretty obvious. And that way you can see that blends work with both fills and strokes. All right, now I'll go ahead and switch back to the black arrow tool, which you can get by pressing the V key, and I'll shift click on the square in order to select it. Now to blend between the two shapes, you go up to the object menu, you choose blend, and you choose the make command, which has a keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-B or Command-Option-B on the Mac. And we end up with this effect here. So we're essentially creating a kind of custom gradient between the two strokes. And as a result, the gradient is progressing from this medium shade of blue to orange over here in the upper left-hand corner. But if I were to zoom in, you can see that the strokes are growing incrementally thinner. And as a result, toward the end, we're seeing gaps between the strokes that appear yellow because that's the color of the square's fill. All right, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here. Now let's say what you want to do is change the number of intervals between the two shapes. Then you would go up to the object menu, revisit the blend submenu, and choose blend options, which will bring up this dialog box. Now notice by default spacing is set to smooth color. And so what that does is it instructs Illustrator to automatically choose the number of intervals it needs in order to create a smooth gradient. I want to change that spacing to specified steps. You can, however, do distance. That's going to be the distance between your intervals. But if you choose specified steps, that is going to be the number of intervals in between. And notice that Illustrator's telling me, well, right now you're seeing 240 intervals. If you want to change that value, presumably you'd want to turn on the preview checkbox so you can see what you're doing. And I'll go ahead and take this value down to just 2 and press the Tab key. And now you can see our 2 intervals right there, which again, Illustrator refers to as steps. And so we have a first object in the background, we have a second object in the foreground, and then 2 intervals in between. I'm going to take that value up to 6, let's say, and then press the Tab key so we can see the effect. And now click OK in order to accept that change. All right, now the great thing about an object blend like this is that it's entirely dynamic. So if I make any changes to the square or the circle, those changes will be reflected by the intervals in between. And so now that we've got live shapes, I'll go ahead and switch to the ellipse tool so that I can see the specialized widgets. And notice now that I can drag the center of this ellipse, assuming that you're seeing your widgets on screen, and the ellipse will move to a different location, and all the intervals in between will move to a different location as well. The other option is to create a pie by dragging this guy right here, and I'll go ahead and drag it all the way over to this location, and I'll drag this guy over to the right-hand side as well, so that we can see the evolution of a square turning into a Pac-Man. All right, I'll go ahead and drag this guy up just a little bit, and the same is going to happen if I move over to the square and adjust its round corner widgets like so. At that point, we're going to start to see some rounding at the top of these initial shapes. And incidentally, just in case you turned off your live shape widgets, just go ahead and switch over to the wide arrow tool, which you can get by pressing the A key, and then just go ahead and click off the shapes to deselect them, and then click inside one of the shapes to select it. For example, I've clicked inside my pie-shaped circle, and then you would go ahead and select either the rectangle tool or the ellipse tool, at which point you can see the shape widgets icon up here in the control panel, and you can either turn it off to make the widgets go away, or you can turn it on to make those widgets come back. All right, and the other thing I can do is switch back to the wide arrow tool and drag this shape around, and that's going to cause the blend to update automatically as well. And last, I just want you to notice, in case you haven't already, that each one of the intervals is gradually progressing in terms of fill and stroke color as well as line weight. And so with this circle selected, if I was to take that line weight up to, let's say, 24 points and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac, that's going to affect all the intervals in between as well. And so that's how you create an object blend between two shapes and have it update dynamically in response to any modifications you might make here inside Illustrator.